Hi, everyone. You have Debbie and Katie here with How to Cope When Stuff Gets Real. We're back. I'm sorry we missed a month. February was pretty real around here for me, and we needed a little break, but we're back. And this month we have a couple of things that we want to talk about, but the overarching theme is holding space versus holding on. And one of the energies of March that I have been encountering a lot in my sessions and my work with people is this idea of being the empowered empath, the embodied empath. Empathy is a superpower rather than this thing that we have to be afraid of or snowed under by. And so that's a big part of what we're going to talk about today. Debbie, how are you?
I'm great, Katie. Thanks. Thanks for asking. Yeah, it's been a wild ride, hasn't it? February. I'm happy to be here, be back with you.
Yeah, we've got some big energies in March. We have a Mercury retrograde, a Venus retrograde, and an eclipse, which is basically prime time for us to make a big shift as a collective and as individuals and do our shadow work. And this topic of holding space versus holding on, I think, is a shadow work aspect, or it could be a shadow work aspect. And this came in because I was in session with somebody this past week and I texted Debbie and I said, "Hey, this is a big download that just came in. I think this would be good for us to talk about on the show." And I was working with a client on their boundaries with a loved one that they really care about. And I realized when she was talking to me that there was a lot of codependency and enmeshment going on. And what the guide said to her is that she was holding on versus holding space.
Mm.
And energetically in her field, what that looked like was her not being centered in her auric field. So when I looked at the mechanics of her energy body, she was sitting at the back of her auric field with her whole energy bubble, her auric field bubble pushed out and enveloping the person that she was concerned about. And so she was holding on to them because she was afraid that what they were going through was going to be something that would break them in their partnership. And so instead of stepping into her power and holding an empathetic space and being centered in her knowing, she started to take on the energy and the emotions of the person that she was in relationship with. And then she couldn't really tell what was hers and what was theirs. And then there was a lot of anger and frustration and hostility that was coming up because she was holding on to so many of their emotions. And so we talked about her pulling back, and that holding space doesn't mean that you hold on to what's happening for the other person. You step back into your awareness and your empathy, and you hold compassion and you hold love, and you are the unattached observer in that moment of whatever emotional process that person is having. And you might also hold a vision for them of how they are going to move through this, not necessarily in the mechanics of how they're going to move through it, but hold a vision that they can move through it, being a supportive partner, a cheerleader, if you will, for the person that you're in partnership with. And of course, this applies to every relationship. This is not just something that shows up in partnership, although I work with people on that a lot. And so, Debbie, I know you have been getting some downloads on enmeshment and family stories of codependency and empathy too. So, what did you want to share?
About what you just said.
Sure. Yeah. Start
So
with.
how do you help? I guess I have questions for you because I can totally relate to being an empathic codependent myself because that's my background, my family background. And trying to break that cycle with my own kid it's been a journey for me. And I understand that because I do feel so deeply. So when other people are hurting, it's hard for me not to hurt as well. It's hard for me. Well, in the past, this has been hard for me to move into a space of compassion instead of empathy. So how do you see those two differing?
I think compassion is a framework within empathy that is empowered. So I think we have disempowered empathy where we are the transmuter of everything that's happening around us and we're feeling it because we feel responsible. And we have empowered empathy, which I think is a range of emotions, including compassion, that we can hold for those having an experience. I think we can also hold empowered empathy and be angry on somebody's behalf and be frustrated on somebody's behalf that they're struggling or that they're maybe being marginalized in a community. I think that's how we get into an empowered state of empathy. But when we are in a disempowered state of empathy, it becomes so heavy and so burdensome, and we feel responsible for taking that on in order to help or fix the person that we're witnessing or the situation that we're witnessing. And that's when I think it becomes something other than a superpower. And that's when we can get into stuck places in relationship and in the world where we're witnessing the events that are happening on the world stage, even, and going into a powerless state of being versus being able to hold whatever we're witnessing in compassion and joy and the potential for joy in the future.
So I asked someone else how they would describe the difference between empathy and compassion, and they talked about empathy is actually, okay, I'm going to jump in the hole with you,
Mm.
where compassion is actually giving them a ladder and help giving them a hand up. So what would be the practical steps that you would help a client with to help them be an empowered empath or start to tease out how they got there in the first place, be disempowered? How
I
would you
think,
do that?
I think step one is, first of all, being empowered in their own emotional process. I think a lot of times what I see with people, and this is very prevalent for women especially, is that we've been conditioned to be in a subservient role where we're of service and we're the caretaker first and foremost and always. And what that looks like in the energy body is us actually giving over our sacral chakra space, which is where our empathic, intuitive nature lives. Our emotional body lives in our sacral chakra in our low belly. And so when we are in a wounded empathy place, what I often see is that they've just given that sacral chakra over to whoever they're in relationship with. And a lot of times the reason for that, first and foremost, is because they have been afraid to feel their own feelings and have been conditioned that their depth of feeling, their natural empathic nature, their natural sensitive nature as a feminine being, and this is could be prevalent for the masculine as well, is wrong or bad. Maybe they were a very sensitive child. Maybe they had a really difficult home environment and they had a lot of emotional reaction to that, but the adults around them were very compartmentalized. And so they were conditioned that their emotional process was not okay. But that doesn't just go anywhere. That emotional body and that empathy needs a job. And so, because they're not feeling their own emotions, they start becoming the caretaker of everybody around them and running that energy in their sacral chakra and their emotional body for everybody else. And then by the time they realize that they're doing that, they have no energy, they have no vitality, they have no desire for intimacy because they are intimacied out, right? Because they're caretaking for everyone and they've given that space over, and then they can't create the things in their life that they would like to move forward and create. And so I think step one and step two, step one being feel your feelings. Step two, start to take ownership of where you are getting in the way of other people's process and start to take responsibility and accountability for that and pull out of that in a way that is compassionate to self. And then step three looks like making a different choice in relationship going forward, where when you get into new relational dynamics or you reset relational dynamics, you do not self-abandon in those moments where somebody else needs something. That you first have a moment and a pause to check in with yourself and see if you even have the capacity in that moment to hold space for somebody. Because oftentimes, when we are pushed beyond our capacity, is when we start to drop into a place of holding on versus holding space, because we have not taken care of our own emotional landscape before we start to go in and caretake another's.
Hmm. I think that self-abandonment piece has is it's been huge for me and self-betrayal, right? And that all ties back to the inner child, right? I'm going to do to myself what my parents did to me. So that's huge. And I see the first step for me has been, in trying to heal my codependency is becoming self-aware, right? That was my first step is, oh, okay, what are my feelings? My own feelings. I don't even know what I feel. And then actually regulating my nervous system, like becoming self-regulated. And then also a piece of that is becoming self-differentiated,
Mm.
like knowing that because I can feel other people's feelings doesn't mean that we're not the same person. And trying to just determine what is mine, what is theirs, and just differentiate myself, my own.
What what has worked for you in trying to determine that self-differentiation piece? Because people ask me all the time how to know if something is theirs versus someone else's. What has worked for you in that process of starting to separate from other people's process and emotions?
I think becoming more aware of my own intuition, spending more time alone, spending more time in nature, just becoming more sensitive to my own feelings and my own self. And actually, I think, yeah, just spending time by myself and trying to figure out what is mine, because it's hard for me and it when I'm with people to make that decision. So that was really the first step is just going inward, spending time alone, spending time in nature.
Yeah, I think we often discount how important it is for us when we are sensitive beings and working on being in our compassion versus our disempowered empathy, to just have time to pull back from everything and to get quiet. I always call it going into my soft place or my hermit mode. And I'd say for the last couple of weeks, I've been in that. I've really been limiting my connections the last couple of weeks and doing less videos and less outward stuff because I knew that there was some big stuff that I needed to work through still after my dad's passing. And I think that we can't underestimate the power of taking the time to take care of ourselves in those ways because we have so many inputs coming at us all the time.
And I would also say that it's continued to help me tremendously is really just honor my feelings and not betray myself in very little ways, like little daily ways. I went yesterday to a lecture and my friend and I walked in, we were a little bit late and it was not the greatest thing. And normally I would I would say, "Oh, we're late. We should just stand here because we were bad girls anyway because we came late. So I don't want to be really bad and leave early because this is terrible." And but I made the decision, like, life is precious. Why am I wasting another 20 minutes of my life standing here because I don't wanna be seen as not a good person? So, we left, and just those little steps, I think every day, honoring would have never done that as a child. My inner child like, my little girl would have never done that. I would have stayed there.
Yeah, because
So,
that's what a good girl does.
yeah.
Don't ever upset anyone else. Don't ever upset the apple cart. Always do what everyone asks you to do. Those are some of the programs that we get. Yeah, I think that's really important to remember that we have to honor those inner whispers from wherever they're coming from, whether that's from the inner child or some empowered or disempowered part of you that's speaking in those moments, to remember to honor those whispers. And we want to always take care of that vulnerable inner child in that way because it starts to build a reparenting relationship with that inner child where there's trust. Because the fact of the matter is, and you and I were talking about this before we got on, that all of those versions of us from our inner child landscape are still walking right with us. They're still wanting to be heard. They're still working through their wounds just as we are in our adult self. And when we're discounting those inner voices or those inner knowings, we're actually adding to the shame that those inner child pieces carry or the unworthiness that those inner child pieces carry when we're not listening to them.
That was a huge epiphany for me this past week, that just knowing that even though I've done inner child work, my 3rd grade girl is still with me. My high schooler is still with me, and my college student is still with me. So it's fascinating to me that I'm still walking around and having to really or I should be honoring them, all those parts of me where I'm not really paying any attention to them at all. So
Yeah, they're looking to you to be their caretaker still.
and I'm ignoring them.
So, how is it for you to be the mom of two girls and breaking these patterns of codependency and enmeshment and parenting from a different vibration than what you were parented in? Because I have a lot of clients who are working on that. They're working on being parents who are parenting very differently than how they were raised. And so, how is it for you to have these awarenesses, and what does that look like in your parenting process?
It's been a big job. It's been a journey, and I think it started really when they were much younger, and I was able to ask them, do you need me to just learning how to listen? Because I don't think I really knew how to listen as my I just wanted to fix or do it for them. Asking them, do you need me to just listen or do you want some solutions? Do you want some solutions? Want some help with this or do you want to just vent? Do you want me to just listen? And most of the time they just say, I just want you to listen.
Mm.
So they don't really want my help. That was the biggest game changer for us, I think, in our relationship.
The number one thing that I hear when I talk to people's inner childs, because when I get in session with people, sometimes they can't hear their inner child, but I hear them screaming loudly. And they always say, I want to be seen, I want to be heard, I want to be validated. And inside of all of us is an inner child that's still asking for that, whether it's a child that we're parenting like you are, or a friend that we're holding space for. They don't actually want us to come in and hold on and solve and fix. They just want to be seen. And there's something I think so powerful when we can witness and observe another human's process and just hold space as being the witness of that. When I start off my sessions, a lot of times with when I have a new client that comes in and I do a space setting exercise and then I do a read of their energy field and I see parts of them that they're showing me that maybe have trauma or have been hidden. A lot of times people immediately start crying and they're like, I don't know why I'm crying. I'm like, because you're being seen. And that is probably the most powerful gift I think we can give another human being is witnessing what they're struggling with or witnessing what they're moving through, holding a non-judgmental space and just being the observer of that because it allows them in that moment if that emotion is coming up to fully alchemize through whatever emotion is arising and reclaim the power that has been hiding behind those stuck emotions. And if we can do that for each other, I think that is the superpower of empathy. I think that's being the embodied empath. And especially if we can stay in our bodies while we're witnessing them have those big emotions and not get dysregulated and not lose our center as well, that is embodied empathy, I think.
That that's the issue for me. My parents were really never truly present with me, so that's the way that I intended on parenting, but I think I overcorrected in that department. I was so present. I was gonna be there. I was gonna whatever wasn't done for me, I was gonna do for them, and so that was not necessarily the best thing to do. I think they were too seen. They were too I was too there. So,
Yeah, we often course correct in the other direction. And
yeah,
so I tell my parents when they come in and they're working on this and they're like, I'm never going to be like my mom. And I'm like, ooh, let's just pause that statement for 1 second. And let's take the template that you got as how you were parented and let's just put that over to the side. Let's almost imagine that we could come in and bring in a completely clean slate and you could look out and look at your children as they are now and decide based on all of the ways that you've seen people parent, all of the things that you've seen in society, all of the conditioning and all of the other pieces that you've brought in, and figure out how you want to parent. What is your truth as a parent? And what always happens is they go, oh, they realize that in trying not to be the way their parents were, that they're still being informed by that vibration, by that frequency, by that programming. And when we clear the slate, there's this amazing freedom that comes in that they then get to say, gosh, I have a lot more work to do as a parent to decide how I want to show up as a parent and not just go into default modes or conditions. And then when they do that, invariably they'll send me an email or something will happen within a couple of weeks and they'll reach out to me and go, my kid's behavioral issue that I was really struggling with, or this thing that I was really struggling with and couldn't figure out how to parent through, somehow we just had a breakthrough and that's not happening anymore. That child was inviting them to work through something in that relationship contract with that parent. And the moment that they became neutral to how they were parented and they helped their own inner child to heal, they became a better parent in that moment. And that relationship contract with their child changed.
that's amazing. I think it always changes though, because our kids are always growing. Parenting preschoolers is very different than parenting a middle schooler versus, and this constant learning dance I find that I'm doing with my kids. They're learning to speak up for their needs at what they need at each stage, and I'm learning to adjust to that and try to not overcorrect, try to not be triggered of what my relationship trauma was at that age that they currently are. So, it's a challenge. It's a journey.
It's a lot of work to be a conscious parent.
Yeah.
A lot of work to be a conscious human, isn't it? Right,
Yes,
where
it
we're
is.
actually doing our inner work and checking in with what's going on in our landscape and deciding if we're reacting from a trigger or if we're reacting from a place of wholeness and truth in each moment. And I think that same model of how we hold space for friends and partners, I think it's the same, right? We bring a lot of preconceived notions about what it means to be in different types of relationships, friendships, partnerships, work relationships, and looking at those biases that come in from the programming that we got, I think is really important because we will react from the place of least resistance, right? Whatever conditioning we have, we will react from that place, but it may not be working for us or the other person. And so when we get feedback from somebody else, that empathy allows us to stay in a state of openness to hopefully hold compassion for whatever the other person's process is and be able to actually, as you said earlier, really hear them and
Mhm,
see what they're really trying to tell us and what they really need from us. And,
mhm.
I think that's a bit of a journey for a lot of us because listening is maybe not as easy as we think it is.
Absolutely not. Especially, I think for me, when I see friends going through something that I've gone through that's extremely painful, I want to help. I want to be a friend because that's what I think a friend is. But it's hard sometimes just to listen and not give advice when yeah, it's really hard. And I can talk about how, like, I can give an example of what that really hit home for me with my daughter that I maybe this will help somebody because it was profound. I was grew up with alcoholic parents, and I had my ex-husband was an alcoholic, and so I decided in my self-healing journey that I would go to Al-Anon at one point, and I didn't really say much during that meeting because I just don't say much anyway. So I would just was listening, but I really got the principles, and I didn't realize how much I got it until my daughter came home from college on break, and she went into the backyard and she was sitting on a chair and was crying. She was acting really weird. She was crying. And I was like, what is going on with you? And she's, I can't tell you, mom, because you're going to go crazy. You're going to go absolutely crazy. And I was like, no, I can really just listen. I know how to just listen now. And then she told me, and she was attacked. So this was a big deal. And I don't think she would have told me and unless I really did learn how to just listen and not go crazy because she was right. I would have gone crazy. Like the old me would have gone crazy. So I didn't. And that was very difficult, but that was one of the best lessons I think that I've ever had. It was a tough lesson, but it was good. And it doesn't mean it makes it any easier for me now when I see friends in so much pain and I know that I can help them. And I just really have to be the cheerleader for them and not fix anything.
I think that's part of why it's hard to be an empathic, sensitive human being is that we we can so easily feel the suffering of those that we love and even I think strangers and people that we've never met, we can feel that and we inherently don't want to feel that. It's uncomfortable and it's painful to witness and feel the impact of somebody else's suffering and what's happening for them in their story, but there's such power in that too. That means that we're alive. That means that we're feeling deeply. That means that we are open. And in those moments of not wanting to feel that pain, we can easily go into that fix it mode or that holding on mode. instead of holding space. And just because we want the pain to be over, not just for them, but also for us, because we're experiencing it to such a deep degree. And what I have found is that the more that I work on being in my empathy as a superpower and seeing that my deeply feeling nature is actually maybe the most important gift that I can give to the world in each moment, and letting that pass through me, even when it's wretchedly difficult, having a huge emotional release and a full heart opening feels really painful most of the time. But when I move through it, there's something that happens inside of me on the other side where that feeling part of me opens up, and then my aliveness expands and my ability to experience gratitude and love and compassion expands too. And I would much rather be a deeply feeling being who cries for others when I witness their pain and can hold that space with them in that way versus somebody who is compartmentalized and turned off. I think I spent a lot of years having to do that because I didn't know that there was any other way. And then when my body became really painful, I realized, okay, I can't do this anymore because my body was taking the brunt of it and it woke me up. But the more I drop into my inner child and my feminine nature and my sensitive nature, the more powerful I think I become. And I wish that everybody would realize that, because I think that's how this world changes. I think that's how we come back to love as a uniting frequency is through empathy. I think those of us who are empathic and sensitive beings are the leaders of tomorrow because we're going to transform this planet. At least that's my belief.
Oh, that would be amazing.
Yeah. That's the vision that I'm holding anyways. So I know we may not see that at the top of the house, and we may see all of the things that are contrary to that, that are maybe not in that vibration of love, but witnessing it and feeling what comes up for us and then coming back to our center and taking good care of ourselves. That's our act of rebellion right now. That's our act of resiliency, I think, that we can bring to the table in these really transformative times.
That's great advice.
So, anything else that you want to share from your research and your dropping into this topic that you've been doing?
I think I've been working a lot this week on having coming back to a place of neutral, and that kind of is a little bit counterintuitive to the deeply feeling empath.
I have thoughts on that too. Keep going.
So I just trying to think, okay, what I think is awful is not always awful. It's often really the best thing that could be happening or that kind of thing. So I'm trying to come back to a place of neutrality about things. I'm really working on that. So,
I actually think neutrality is a deeply empathic energy. What I teach people when I teach them how to hold energetic space is that I teach them how to turn their lower three chakras to neutral. Neutral doesn't mean that we don't feel.
mhm.
That's detachment. Neutral means that we're not identifying with what's happening with that other person as our truth in that moment. We're observing, we're witnessing, we're tasting it, as I say, that emotion, but we're coming back to our center. I think neutrality is amazing.
Yeah, I'm working on that because there's a lot of things happening on and I like, if I could just stay neutral about my life and the world around me, then I would be in better shape. Yeah, thank you for that, Katie.
I feel like we've been shamed about being neutral because the world really wants us to be in polarity.
Mm,
World wants us to pick a side and blame one or the other in order to make them feel better about their choices. Not everybody, but a lot of people want that. And so when you hold neutrality and you say, oh, I can see how somehow this is serving, even if I don't see that it is yet, and I can see some positive in this really negative thing, we get shamed for that a lot, I think. I think we're told that we're spiritually bypassing, and I don't think those two things are the same thing. Spiritually bypassing to me is when we disconnect from everything and we just pretend there aren't any impacts to the world events that are happening, right? We pretend to ignore any suffering that's going on. And I think neutrality says, I'm going to see it. I'm going to see it all. I'm going to see all of the hard things that are happening, but I'm also going to look for the beauty, and I'm going to try to uphold that and expand that as much as I can.
Mhm.
And sometimes we might have to work really hard, even in our own experience, to find the beauty, or we won't get to it until after we've integrated the experience. But I think neutrality is powerful. I think it is the energy that allows us to transmute so many things.
For sure.
Mm.
For sure. And I think, I maybe that's the gift in my journey is that I'm able to see some of the horrible things that have happened as total gifts. Like I would not be here if that didn't happen. So I can put the pieces together in retrospect. So I'm trying to put the stay neutral, knowing that really is the thing. Whatever I'm going through that I consider negative could be the greatest gift for me.
Yeah, and sometimes we're in that moment of going through something really hard and somebody tries to help us see that, and we're not ready to see it yet. I'm
Oh,
You've had that experience where you're in the process of the emotions and the experience, and you just need to be in the suck of it for just a second. And I think that's also valuable, right? We go fully into the process of feeling whatever's triggered in that moment. We let ourselves have that experience of victimization or whatever has happened in and being in that place of truth. And when we're ready, when we feel like we've given that due and we've processed it, then we might be able to receive those lessons of how it's serving. But I can remember many times where somebody's tried to help me see the glass half full, and I have been very angry, angry with them trying to get me there before I was ready. Just let me be indignant and upset for just a minute.
for sure, but at the same time, I think I've always been able, or I'm speaking from my own experience, that maybe I might be able to help somebody else someday go through this very same thing, at the very least. Even if I don't get the lessons or whatever, I can help somebody else.
There's
Yeah,
always medicine in that pain,
yeah,
whether it's for us or for somebody else. Hopefully, it's for both. We
yeah.
hold that intention. Beautiful. Any other thoughts from you on navigating and being in this place of neutrality and holding space versus holding on when it comes to the broader stage of events that are occurring on the planet versus these one-to-one relationships of parent and partnership and friendship that we talked about? What's helping you to stay in that neutral place with the world events right now?
I think it's something that I heard, this was Bashar who said something like, I'm gonna try to not butcher this, but if you believe that everything is going to be okay in the end, right? That everything is serving for the good. What do you care what happens? So I, that's been popping into my head this week. I'm like, it's okay. It's all going to be good. It's, there's an end point to this, and I believe it will be good. That's helping me stay in a place of neutral from a larger perspective. I don't know. That's
Yeah,
helpful.
I think that's the faith and surrender part of the journey, right? Where we have to be in a place of even if we can't understand how certain things are happening or going to ultimately serve to move us closer to source and closer to the states of unity that we are on the train moving towards. Part of maybe our role as light workers and way showers and people holding love in our hearts and empathy in our hearts and compassion in our hearts is to just continue to hold that vision for the world too. It occurs to me that when things happen to groups of people and that are in a marginalized part of community, or there's a natural disaster, or there's something really big that occurs where a lot of eyes are on it, that is a way to activate feeling and empathy in the collective. And so those of us that are already in that empathic state are just walking around in that state of openness all the time, but maybe we forget what it is like to be in that compartmentalized or shut down place because they've been so overwhelmed, those that are not in their empathy, and we forget that they need to be woken up, that they need to have that experience of feeling something again so that they can get plugged back into their humanness. And so when you're somebody who's already in that already, it might be like, gosh, do we really have to do it this way? But I have to remind myself that I am not the majority yet, and that there's a lot of people who need to be reminded of their humanness and their empathy that are turned it off.
That's a great point when you bring up people who are experiencing natural disaster, war, and things like that. It's what I bring it back to, like, my kids, for example, when they're going through something, another thing I do is say that they have their own team, they have their own higher power, they have their own journey, they have their own life. So, it doesn't make it great, but I think it just helps me to trust that there is a plan. There is something happening in the universe that, and I'm not responsible for it. Like as much as hard it is to see people in natural disaster, it's they have a life, they have a team, they have a plan, they have a higher power. So I, that just helps me.
Yeah. And we do what we can where we can,
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
I
Yes,
think I
absolutely.
think we all have our moments of being called into action and our intuition pings, and then we get that divine inspiration in that moment of this is how I can help. And sometimes when I work with people, they're so desperately seeking that divine inspiration of how they can be of service that they're forgetting that they are of service every single day when they're showing up in love and compassion. And
Mhm.
that is also really important, and that their marching orders will come. Like I fully believe that as we get more and more aligned as a collective, our individual superpowers and our authentic expression of how we can best serve in these next stages of how we're going to be as a human collective here on earth will start to land. And sometimes we just have to be really patient.
Mm,
And that can be a struggle too, because we feel like we're not doing enough. And my God, I think just feeling and witnessing and being a witness to the suffering is doing a lot. Even if it's not boots on the ground in that moment, you can find your space. I think we can all find a space to help.
for sure.
Mm.
And you're doing a lot to help with your nonprofit. Do you want to
Get in
talk about
there.
that?
It's getting off the ground slowly but surely. It's been a little bit of a journey with everything else going on in my life. But yeah, it's been interesting because Spirit gave me really direct information about what to call it and what the focus was. And then there was all these things that happened in my life that put it on pause for a brief moment. And we've got some stuff brewing. We have some things that my husband has designed that you can purchase that can give money back to our nonprofit that helps with people in natural disasters and emergencies. We've been honing our focus, and I think I mostly want to focus in on working with people to help them heal through the trauma of it. So, providing scholarships for sessions and trauma healing services, and also supporting women and children that maybe were already struggling before and don't have a partner to help them through it and are needing a leg up. That just hits home for me a little bit. So I that's our other area of focus. Yeah, stay tuned. More information coming
That's
about.
beautiful. Where can we find information out about that?
I'll put the link below this to our shop that we just launched, and Josh did a great job. I've had some downloads coming in of different apparel items and some yard signs and stuff that you can purchase, and all of the proceeds will go to our nonprofit called Mother Earth's Embrace.
Nice. I
Yeah.
love that.
Yeah, and there's lots of great organizations helping. If you don't want to donate to us, there's plenty of people out there doing really good work for all of the things that are occurring on this planet. So find what's aligned in your heart and help there.
Yeah. Thank
Awesome.
you, Katie.
Thank you, Debbie. And we will hopefully be back in the month of April. I've got a little travel in April, but we'll fit it in somewhere. And we'll talk more about how to cope when stuff gets real next month. Bye, everyone.